Looking back at the history of crime around the world, it is hard to count the number of murders that have been committed as a result of sexual desire. Some of these cases of sexual assault and murder of children are even more heinous and outrageous. From 1971 through 1973, 3 child murders occurred in Rochester, located in Monroe County. The 3 victims were Carmen, Wanda, and Michelle. In 1995, a grieving mother, interviewed by the media, claimed that although she had been poor all her life, if she could have one thing on her deathbed, she wouldn't want wealth. She only had the luxury of an answer. She wanted to know who murdered her daughter. She said, "If I could die knowing who the murderer was, I would die peacefully without any hesitation. The only thing I would want is to make the murderer pay for the horrible things that were done to my little girl." On November 16th, 1971, as the day was getting dark, as usual, people preparing to go home were driving on Interstate 490, when at about 5:10 p.m., drivers traveling on this highway noticed a girl running along the road. The girl's appearance panicked, frantic, yelling and waving her skinny arms repeatedly in what looked like an attempt to stop the cars that passed by her vehicles passing her. The girl was completely naked from the waist down, and not far behind her, another dark-colored Ford was backing up in her direction. Unfortunately, no one heard what the girl said, and the drivers who were not sure of the exact situation did not dare to recklessly get out of their cars. They just watched as the girl made some gestures with a message of distress, and then drove past her. And 10 minutes later, it was witnessed that the fleeing girl being forced by a man into the dark-colored Ford. 2 days later, 2 teenagers found the remains of a girl in a ravine near a village called Churchville, not far from Interstate 490. And after a coroner's examination, the girl had been sexually assaulted prior to her death. She suffered a fractured skull and a section of a vertebrae, and extensive scratches to her body, and her cause of death was asphyxiation caused by being strangled from the front. Police later confirmed the girl's identity as the girl who had been reported missing by her family 2 days earlier at the age of 10, named Carmen. On the day of the murder, the girl had gone to the drugstore alone to help her grandmother buy prescription medication. However, when told that she would have to wait, she told the owner, I have to go, and then she walked out of the drugstore and got into a car on the side of the road. A couple of hours later, Carmen, half naked, was on an interstate highway calling for help. The murder case quickly drew the attention of the local media in New York State, and an angry public blamed the drivers who had coldly watched Carmen try to escape the kidnapping but did nothing about it. In addition, several newspapers and businesses, as well as private individuals, put up rewards in the hope that someone would be able to provide clues about the murderer. However, the most surprising thing was that even if no one can see the murderer's face clearly, there should be a large number of sighting clues, but there were no useful clues. And a month after the murder, the police seemed to have lost interest in the case. The number of investigators in charge of the murder was reduced to 3. The public was outraged by the police's negativity, and in response to this, in early 1972, the Rochester Outdoor Advertising Company took it upon themselves to erect 5 large billboards alongside the main highways in Rochester, which featured a picture of Carmen, and which said, "Do you know who killed Carmen?" There was a $6,000 reward for any valid leads you could give. They wanted to use this opportunity to pressure the police to reopen the investigation. This time, the police characterized the case as the work of an acquaintance. For example, Carmen's strange behavior, the fact that she did not have her grandfather accompany her, and the fact that it was not as if she had been lured into the car, but more as if she had been invited to get into the car by a person close to her. So they named as a suspect Carmen's uncle, her father's brother Miguel. A few weeks before the murder, Miguel had purchased a car that closely resembled the vehicle seen by the witnesses, and the police examined the car and found that the interior and exterior of the car had been extensively cleaned, and that the trunk had been purposely cleaned. Furthermore, 2 days after Carmen's death, Miguel told his friends that he was planning to leave the United States because of some things that he had done wrong in Rochester, and he then moved from Rochester to Puerto Rico. In March of 1972, investigators traveled to Puerto Rico and intended to interrogate Miguel. The local newspaper picked up on this information, and they published in their paper that the police were about to interrogate Miguel, who chose to run away, although a few days later he chose to turn himself in again. During the interrogation, Miguel was unable to provide any alibi, and there was no one to verify his whereabouts, but due to the limitations of forensic techniques, they did not have any substantial evidence to use against Miguel. although there was strong circumstantial evidence that Miguel had killed Carmen. On April 2nd, 1973, about 5 p.m., 11-year-old Wanda, who was reported missing on the east side of Rochester, Wanda's mother said that earlier that day she instructed Wanda to go to the delicatessen to buy things, but the girl did not answer until 8 p.m., so she chose to call the police. Then the police questioned the owner of the delicatessen. He said that he had indeed met Wanda at about 5:15 p.m. She bought some groceries here and then left. At first, the police just thought that the girl didn't go home just because she was playful. However, just as the police sought out people in the neighborhood, several residents recalled seeing a girl struggling with a bag of groceries and walking in the direction of her house at around 5 p.m. In addition, 3 of Wanda's classmates pointed out that at that time they noticed a dark-colored automobile passing Wanda's side and then stopping again. Noticing something unusual, the police sent nearly 50 detectives to search the neighborhood when they had disappeared, and the area of the Genesee River where Wanda often played, but came up empty. The next day at 10:15 a.m., after a non-stop search, a police officer found Wanda's body at the bottom of a hillside near Webster Highway, a place roughly 7 miles from Rochester. The autopsy report showed that Wanda had been sexually assaulted, and they extracted the killer's residual semen. And the cause of the girl's death was confirmed to be strangulation, suspected to be by the murderer who choked her with a leather belt from behind. There were also several defensive wounds, proving that the girl had put up a fierce resistance. When found, Wanda's clothes were neat and tidy. Apparently, the murderer had tidied up the body after carrying out the attack. In addition, the police found several white cat hairs on the girl's clothes, which were confirmed to be not belonging to any of the animals in Wanda's house. The police later found an eyewitness who said that on the day of the murder, roughly 300 meters from Wanda's house, he saw the girl standing next to the passenger door of a brown car and talking to the driver, but he did not get a clear view of the driver's face. On October 21st, a 30-minute program aired on local television where they reconstructed Wanda's abduction and appealed to witnesses to be able to contact the police with any leads. And despite receiving over 200 calls, the police were not able to get any useful leads. A month after the program aired, a new case occurred again in the Rochester area. On the evening of November 26th, 11-year-old Michelle was reported missing by her mother. The police took the suspected case of what was becoming a serial murder extra seriously, and they immediately launched an investigation. Michelle's classmates reported that they saw Michelle walking alone in a shopping plaza near her school at approximately 3:20 p.m. Michelle's mother explained that she had sent Michelle there to retrieve her purse that she had accidentally left in a store earlier in the day, and that the next thing that happened was that at approximately 3:30 p.m., a witness saw Michelle sitting in the passenger seat of a beige or brown car. The car was traveling down the street at a high rate of speed before entering Webster Avenue, and the witness explained that at first he saw Michelle crying constantly, and he paid attention because he thought it was a domestic dispute. In addition to this, an employee of a fast food restaurant in Bloomfield Township and a driver provided clues as to the killer's subsequent actions. At approximately 4:30 p.m., the fast food employee noted that a white male between the ages of approximately 25 and 35 entered the restaurant and purchased a burger with a young girl suspected to be Michelle. The male was approximately 6 feet tall and weighed around 165 pounds. At approximately 5:30 p.m., located along the highway in the town of Walworth, a driver saw the man standing next to a beige or brown car with a flat tire. He was carrying the little girl, who was suspected to be Michelle. At first, the driver thought that the duo was a father and daughter in need of help, so he stopped his car. However, when the man saw that someone was stopping and wanted to be nosy, he firstly pushed her behind his back to keep the driver from seeing the girl's face. He also covered the license plate number and kept staring at the driver with a threatening look on his face, causing the driver to get scared and leave the scene. Michelle's body was found around 10:30 a.m. on November 28th, lying face down in a ditch on a rural road in Macedonia, a place about 15 miles from Rochester. Following the same pattern as the Wanda murders, the girl was sexually assaulted, and the cause of death was human strangulation, suspected to have been strangled by the murderer with a belt from behind. Her clothes were covered in a lot of white cat hairs. Due to forensic technology limitations, the police could only confirm from the semen extracted from the body that there was no possibility of multiple offenses in this case, and could not confirm through this evidence that the person who killed Michelle was Wanda's murderer. In addition, the residue in the victim's stomach was identified as a burger from a fast food restaurant, which confirmed to the police that the fast food restaurant employee's testimony was correct and that there was no error in the description of the killer's features. Based on the eyewitness's description of the murderer's appearance, the police produced a composite sketch of the suspected murderer and also set up a special telephone hotline to hunt for the murderer. Any caller providing information would be anonymized, and there would also be a reward for valid information. This time, the police got the public's support, and in a short period of time, they obtained a large number of clues, including more than 800 potential suspects who might be related to the murder case. With so many potential suspects, the police believed that the murderer was hiding among them. However, as the suspects were continuously eliminated from suspicion, the fact once again dashed the public's hope. The murderer, who had been witnessed by countless people, disappeared as if he had evaporated from the face of the world and never appeared again, never committing the same case again. Miguel was held responsible by the police only for Carmen's death, and the killers of Wanda and Michelle were identified as the same person because of the similarity of their death scenes, having been sexually assaulted and strangled by the killer using a belt, and the fact that after both girls' deaths their clothes were organized by the killer, and that the white cat hairs that were stuck to their clothes were a similar marking. In addition to the two serial killers, Kenneth and Joseph, Dennis was identified as a major suspect. The man was a Rochester firefighter who committed at least 14 sexual assaults on girls and young women during the period of the triple murders. And although police found no traces of Dennis's crimes at the crime scenes, more and more similar clues were unearthed as the police investigated. Dennis lived near where Michelle was last seen alive. He also had a beige car which, upon examination, had traces of white cat hair remaining in the interior. And in 2007, in an attempt to confirm whether Dennis had committed suicide, the police exhumed his body, and they matched the semen remaining from Wanda's murderer with Dennis's DNA. However, the test results proved that he was not responsible for Wanda's death. These three murders plagued the Rochester area for more than 50 years. Parents no longer dared to leave their children alone, and students began to go to school in groups. And although it would almost never have been the work of the same assailant, the public connected the cases because of a few unbelievable coincidences, such as the fact that the families of the three girls were all poor, and that their personalities were weak, introverted, and were all at the age of 10 or 11. In addition, each girl's last name and initials were the same, as were the names of the remote towns or villages in which the remains were found: Carmen in Churchville, Wanda in Webster, and Michelle in Macedon. And thus, the series of murders became collectively known as the alphabet murders, or the double initial murders.